Should more black people buy guns? That's the debate topic on Revolt Black News. Really interesting video. I'm going to go ahead and play parts of it and respond to it. The first will be the pro-gun side of the debate, and then part two will be linked in the description. It'll be the anti-gun side of the debate. That's a little bit spicier. Let's go ahead and let's jump right in.
Joining me is co-founder of Redstone Firearms, which is a federal firearms dealer in Southern California, Miss Geneva Solomon. Also with us is rapper, political activist, and founder of Black Guns Matter, Maj Toure. Welcome both of y'all to the show. Maj, I want to start with you. Your organization is Black Guns Matter. So can you tell us a little bit about what implored you to set up that organization and nonprofit?
Well, one, you just keep seeing guys catch the same possession charge. Guys are getting arrested for simple possession. We're not talking about guys, and some of them are your friends. We're not talking about guys that have robbed somebody or killed somebody, just missing information. So that was the impetus for starting.
Now, just a quick point, you got to get this. You're going to hear people constantly say on the pro-control side that it's too easy to get guns and there's not enough regulations and it's less regulated than food or books. Barack Obama literally said it's easier to buy a gun than a book. That's his whole organization is de facto proof that that isn't true. It's set up in order to help people avoid the very persnickety, specific, nuanced laws in their unique areas because different counties and different states have very specific ways that they want you to procure your guns, that they want you to carry your guns, when you can carry, how you go about getting the right to carry, that sort of a thing. And so a lot of guys, they're lawful, moral men just trying to protect themselves, standing in the gap between violence and the innocence behind them. And yet they're still getting charged for all sorts of gun charges because these laws are so specific. So no, they're not underregulated. They're almost certainly overregulated. Even if you don't believe that they're overregulated, the idea that they're underregulated is simply preposterous.
But you can't say Black Lives Matter and not have the means to protect Black life.
John Lott has the largest data set ever compiled on both gun data, as well as violent crime, as well as concealed handgun licenses. And what he's shown definitively is that as concealed handgun licenses go up in an area, violent crime, including rape and murder, go down precipitously. And this accounts for hundreds of variables, including the time trends of murder rates and violent crime, including other factors such as socioeconomic factors. And so what he has shown is that not only does that relationship exist, but it disproportionately affects areas that are highly populated, areas that are highly populated by women, and areas that are highly populated by Black people, because these areas tend to be high crime and because there tend to be high gun control standards. The only people who are not armed in those areas are the innocents, those who are already obeying the law. And so as you make it easier for Black lives to protect themselves, you will see more Black life being preserved.
And I think some people have the misconception that, Black guns matter is somehow running contrary to the concept of Black lives mattering. And I think with the racist roots of gun control in this nation, it's very important that Black people do not outsource their security and rely on the government for that.
I love that line. You Black people shouldn't outsource their own protection. Listen, obviously, nobody should. In fact, one of my favorite lines or kind of cliche talking points that you hear, even if you entirely trust the police, even if you think they're not systemically racist and entirely corrupt in every way and that all cops are bad and that we should abolish the police, even if you don't hold that position, if you entirely trust them, they're minutes away when seconds count. When an evil man chooses violence, only violence will stop him. And instead of outsourcing it to the violence of the state, you have to make the internal tough choice to not let yourself be victimized. That's to say nothing of the fact that there's an entire Black Lives Matter movement that is predicated on the idea that the cops don't care about Black people and will do anything to essentially harm them. They're systemically racist, yada, yada, yada. If you think that Black Lives Matter, that most cops are bad and that the entire institution of policing is set up to over-police and systemically discriminate against Black people, you should be the most pro Second Amendment person in the debate.
We all know in this conversation that there's a lot of narrative, some of which is very false, about Black gun ownership and how gun ownership in general can make us all unsafe. Can you both, starting with you, Geneva, give us a sense of correcting some of those misconceptions about Black gun ownership and the safety of Black communities?
Yeah, a lot of the falsehoods that you hear is that having a gun makes you unsafe. Can that be true? Possibly, but we don't believe in that if you are going about it the right way. If you're going out there and you're just getting a gun and you bring it home and there's no conversations with the children in the home, if that's the case, or the family members of that home, and talking about that firearm and knowing that they have the education if they stumble upon a gun when you're not around, that can make it
Mm.
unsafe.
Not only is it possible to be safe as a gun owner, it is statistically the most probable. There are about 120 guns for every 100 people in America. There are significantly more guns than there are people. And yet the number of kids who are accidentally killed every year with firearms range anywhere from the slightly over 100 range to slightly over 300 range. Just to put that in perspective, the number of kids who die drowning is something like 600 a year. The number of kids who die in car accidents is exponentially more than that. So while there are tons and tons and tons of guns, it is simply just not the case that they inherently make your house more dangerous.
Let's be perfectly honest. Gun control is racist, flat out, all of it. You can't run something like that has a history in the slave codes and then run contrary to, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And then where there's the most black people, put the most infringements. So that's kind of like tricking people into convincing them out of their own rights in that regard.
Now, okay, I love Maj. I love most of the things he says. I fundamentally agree with him at the most core level. I think this argument is very, very poorly constructed, and it's the exact same argument that the left is always posing, right? This one thing is rooted in, or in the past was this way, and therefore, because there's some sort of vague similarity to today, therefore it's racist. So he is correct that Black areas have the strictest gun control. He is correct that the first instances of gun control were in the slave codes, which turned into the Jim Crow system. But then he's ignoring the fact that these Black neighborhoods that have such strict gun control only have it because of Black politicians. And I don't think those Black politicians are systemically racist. I think that they are just foolish, and there needs to be a distinction. I just think, honestly, it's just a bunch of libs who find guns scary. I don't think it's malice or racism. I think it's just incompetence, foolishness, people giving themselves over to policy prescriptions governed by emotion as opposed to statistical and rigorous philosophical insight.
But a lot of people say that are anti-gun positions say that the firearm access has become too convenient.
If anyone on the anti-gun side went to buy a gun for the first time last year in the state of California, their mind was blown. You may see articles that says it's easy as going to get a gun out of a vending machine, and that's not the case. You have to have money, for one, because there's a lot of fees associated with that. Two, you have to take a test and pass it. You have to have a license, so to speak, and then you have to wait 10 days. And California will prevent you from buying a firearm even if you have a delinquent speeding ticket.
So people who say this simply haven't purchased a gun before. There's a background check. Every time you buy a gun, there's a background check, unless it's a private sale. If you sell more than two, if you sell even one for a profit, that's illegal. If you sell several a year, the ATF will start investigating you to see if you are actually an unlicensed FFL and not running background checks. There's no legitimate way to purchase guns to get around background checks. They're extremely costly, which means that it's pricing people out already. The fact is that it is very difficult to purchase a gun. It is one of the most difficult things to do. And notice that because they don't know how difficult it is, because they don't buy guns, because they know nothing about guns, they don't have any actual policy prescription. It's just this vague idea that it should be more difficult. And so ask them, what specific law or rule should be on the books that isn't? And would it actually prevent any of the crimes that you're deeply concerned about? For instance, if they are really concerned with mass shootings and they want to ban AR-15s, you could point out to them that 80% of mass shootings are committed with a handgun. Or if they say we need more universal background checks, we have universal background checks. Just push on them a little bit and help them realize that they probably don't know enough about the situation to actually form an opinion, and they certainly shouldn't be voting for politicians who are preying on their ignorance. That's it for part one. Definitely check out part two linked on the screen. If you have not joined my Patreon, you're probably the kind of person who thinks that AR and AR-15 stands for assault rifle. Join the Patreon, check out part two, like, share, subscribe, and until next time, trust in God and keep your powder dry.